The pristine showroom of Prestige Motors gleamed under carefully positioned spotlights, each beam strategically illuminating the curves and contours of luxury vehicles worth more than most people's annual salaries. The polished marble floors reflected the dazzling chandeliers overhead, creating an atmosphere of exclusivity and opulence. Marcus Thompson straightened his tie as he pushed through the glass doors. At 35, he carried himself with quiet confidence born of hard work and determination. The son of a mechanic, he had grown up surrounded by cars but had taken a different path, building a successful tech company that specialized in automotive software. Today marked a milestone. He was finally purchasing his dream car, a sleek, midnight blue Aston Martin Vantage. The showroom was surprisingly empty for a Saturday afternoon. Marcus approached the reception desk where a young woman with perfectly styled hair offered a practiced smile. "Welcome to Prestige Motors. How may I assist you today?" Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes performed a quick assessment of his casual designer attire. "I'm here to finalize my purchase of the Aston Martin Vantage. I spoke with someone named Richard earlier this week." The receptionist's expression shifted subtly. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "Yes, 2 p.m. with Richard Hartman." She glanced at her computer, tapping a few keys. "I don't see any appointments with Richard at 2 p.m. today. Are you sure you have the right date?" Marcus pulled out his phone, bringing up the email confirmation. "Yes, it's right here. Marcus Thompson, 2 p.m., regarding the Aston Martin Vantage purchase." Before the receptionist could respond, a tall man in an immaculately tailored suit approached. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his expression was one of practiced charm that didn't quite reach his cold blue eyes. "Is there a problem here, Melissa?" His voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being in charge. "This gentleman says he has an appointment with Richard, but I don't see it in the system." The man turned to Marcus, extending his hand. "Gerald Whitmore, General Manager. And you are?" "Marcus Thompson. I have a 2 p.m. appointment to finalize my purchase of the Aston Martin Vantage." Gerald's smile tightened. "I see. And who did you say you were meeting with?" "Richard Hartman. We've been in contact all week. Richard is out today, I'm afraid." Gerald's eyes narrowed slightly. "And we don't have any appointments regarding the Vantage. That vehicle is actually reserved for another client." Marcus frowned, holding up his phone. "I have the confirmation email right here, and a text from Richard confirming our appointment yesterday." Gerald barely glanced at the screen. There must have been some miscommunication. "The Vantage isn't available. Perhaps you'd be interested in something more appropriate for your situation." The implication hung in the air like a foul odor. Marcus took a deep breath, maintaining his composure despite the growing tension. "My situation? I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that." Gerald gestured vaguely. "Our vehicles start at a certain price point. The Vantage begins at $150,000. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our pre-owned options or one of our entry-level models." The receptionist shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in her computer screen. "I'm aware of the price," Marcus replied evenly. "As I mentioned, I've already discussed financing and details with Richard. I'm here to complete the paperwork and take delivery." Gerald's smile became strained. "Mr. Thompson, was it? At Prestige Motors, we cater to a specific clientele with particular expectations. The Vantage is a statement piece that requires a certain image to properly represent our brand." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And what image would that be, Mr. Whitmore?" "Our clients expect a level of exclusivity and tradition. The Vantage has already been promised to a long-standing customer who fits our typical demographic profile." "I see." Marcus nodded slowly. "And what is your typical demographic profile?" "I think you know what I mean." Gerald cleared his throat. "Now, if you'd like to look at some other options, I'd be happy to have one of our junior sales associates assist you." Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave as we have several important clients scheduled to arrive shortly. The showroom's ambient music seemed to grow louder in the silence that followed. A few other employees had paused to watch the interaction, their expressions ranging from discomfort to indifference. "Let me make sure I understand," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "I have written confirmation of my appointment and purchase details, but you're now claiming the car is unavailable because I don't fit your demographic profile. Is that correct?" Gerald's practiced smile faltered. "I'm simply saying there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps Richard wasn't authorized to make certain promises. We reserve the right to sell our vehicles to whomever we choose." "Based on what criteria?" Marcus pressed. "Our long-standing relationships with established clients who understand the prestige associated with our brand," Gerald replied smoothly. "Now, I really must insist that I leave." Marcus finished for him. "Because a black man couldn't possibly be your idea of the right image for an Aston Martin owner?" Gerald's expression hardened. "I never said anything about race, Mr. Thompson. Please don't put words in my mouth. This is about protecting our brand and serving our established clientele." "Of course." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "You didn't have to say it explicitly." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the reception desk. "For the record, I came prepared to pay in full today, not finance. But I understand now that my money isn't green enough for Prestige Motors." Gerald's lips pressed into a thin line. "Security," he called, motioning to a burly man standing near the entrance. "That won't be necessary," Marcus said. "I know my way out. But I'd like Richard's contact information, please. I'd like to understand what happened between our conversation yesterday and today." "Richard doesn't make final decisions on sales," Gerald cut in. "Any communication you had with him was preliminary at best." The security guard approached, standing uncomfortably close to Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. I'm going to have to ask you to leave now." Gerald's tone left no room for discussion. Marcus stood his ground for a moment, looking Gerald directly in the eyes. "You know, my father taught me that a person's character is revealed not by how they treat people they think are important, but by how they treat those they believe have no power." He turned toward the exit, the security guard following closely behind. As he reached the glass doors, Marcus paused and looked back at the showroom. "You've made a serious misjudgment today, Mr. Whitmore. And not just about me." With that, he pushed through the doors and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, pulling out his phone as he walked to his car, a modest but well-maintained BMW. Inside the showroom, Gerald turned to the receptionist. "Cancel any pending appointments with Richard for the Vantage. Mark it as sold to the Hendersons." He straightened his tie. "And remind me to have a word with Richard about pre-qualifying potential clients more thoroughly." The receptionist nodded, her discomfort evident. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." 30 minutes later, the showroom doors opened again. A distinguished older white man in an impeccably tailored suit entered, accompanied by a younger black man dressed in a casual but expensive outfit. The older gentleman carried himself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to power and respect. The receptionist brightened immediately. "Mr. Davidson. What a pleasure to see you today. Mr. Whitmore mentioned you might be stopping by." William Davidson, 65 and silver-haired, nodded politely. "Melissa, always a pleasure. Is Gerald available? I'd like to introduce him to my protégé." "Of course. I'll get him right away." She pressed a button on her desk phone, speaking quickly before turning back with a wide smile. "He'll be right out. Can I offer you gentlemen anything while you wait? Water, coffee, champagne perhaps?" "Nothing for me, thank you," William replied. "Terrell?" The younger man shook his head. "I'm good, thanks." Gerald emerged from his office moments later, his face lighting up at the sight of William Davidson, one of the wealthiest real estate developers in the city and a collector of luxury vehicles. "William! What a wonderful surprise!" Gerald extended his hand enthusiastically. "We weren't expecting you until next week for the Ferrari delivery." William shook his hand firmly. "Gerald, good to see you. I wanted to introduce you to Terrell Jackson, my new business partner and the brightest mind in urban development I've encountered in decades." Gerald's smile remained fixed as he shook Terrell's hand. "A pleasure, Mr. Jackson. Any friend of William's is welcome at Prestige Motors. Terrell is looking to add something special to his collection," William continued. "I thought I'd bring him by to see what you have available. Perhaps that Aston Martin Vantage we discussed." A flicker of unease crossed Gerald's face. "Ah, the Vantage. I'm afraid I have some disappointing news. It was just sold this morning to another client." William frowned. "That's odd. I spoke with Richard earlier today to make sure it would be available for Terrell to see. He assured me it was still here." "Richard has been making promises beyond his authority," Gerald said smoothly. "I'll have to speak with him about that. But we have several other exceptional vehicles that Mr. Jackson might find interesting." Terrell studied Gerald's face carefully. "Actually, I had my heart set on the Vantage after seeing the photos Richard sent over. Midnight blue with the custom interior package." "Yes, that's the one," Gerald replied, his discomfort growing. Unfortunately, the showroom doors opened again, and all heads turned to see Marcus Thompson re-entering, accompanied by a striking woman in a tailored business suit. She carried herself with unmistakable authority. Gerald's expression froze as recognition dawned. The woman was Vanessa Richards, CEO of the luxury automotive group that owned Prestige Motors and several other high-end dealerships across the country. "Ms. Richards," Gerald stammered. "This is an unexpected pleasure." Vanessa's expression was pleasant but cool. "Gerald. I was having lunch with Mr. Thompson here when he shared a rather concerning experience he had at our flagship location just this morning." The color drained from Gerald's face. He looked from Marcus to Vanessa, then to William and Terrell, struggling to maintain his composure. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding," he began. "Indeed," Vanessa cut in. "Mr. Thompson tells me he had an appointment to purchase the Aston Martin Vantage, confirmed by one of your sales associates, only to be told upon arrival that he didn't fit the right demographic profile for our brand." The showroom fell silent. Even the ambient music seemed to have stopped, though it was still playing softly in the background. William Davidson's expression darkened as he turned to Gerald. "Is that true, Gerald?" "Mr. Davidson, I assure you that's not what happened," Gerald insisted. "There was simply a scheduling conflict and I have the email confirmation and text messages," Marcus interjected, holding up his phone. "As well as a recording of our conversation from earlier." He turned to William and Terrell. "I apologize for the interruption, gentlemen." William studied Marcus for a moment, then broke into a warm smile. "No apology necessary." He extended his hand. "William Davidson. This is my business partner, Terrell Jackson." As Marcus shook their hands, Gerald's confusion was evident. "You all know each other?" "We've never met," Marcus clarified. "But I recognize Mr. Davidson from the cover of Business Insider last month." Terrell stepped forward. "And I recognize you, Marcus Thompson. Your automotive software platform revolutionized how dealerships manage inventory and customer relationships. In fact, I believe Prestige Motors uses your system." Gerald's eyes widened in shock. "You're that Marcus Thompson? Thompson Tech Solutions?" Vanessa Richards didn't bother hiding her irritation. "Yes, Gerald. The same Marcus Thompson whose company provides the software platform that powers our entire dealer network. The same Marcus Thompson who was referred to us by Richard because he's been a loyal customer of his family's repair shop for years." "I didn't," Gerald began, but Vanessa held up her hand. William called me when Terrell mentioned he was coming here today to look at the Vantage, she explained. Imagine my surprise when I learned that the same car had apparently been promised to two different clients, one of whom happens to be one of our most important business partners. Gerald's face had turned an alarming shade of pale. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. Of course the Vantage is available. I was merely discriminating based on appearance and making assumptions about a client's purchasing power. Vanessa finished for him. That's not how we do business, Gerald. Not at any of our locations. The following hour unfolded in a flurry of activity. Vanessa Richards personally escorted Marcus, William, and Terrell through the showroom, making introductions to key staff members and apologizing repeatedly for the earlier incident. Gerald had been discreetly asked to wait in his office, his future with the company hanging in precarious balance. I can't express enough how deeply embarrassed I am about your experience, Mr. Thompson, Vanessa said as they examined the midnight blue Aston Martin Vantage. This is absolutely contrary to our company values and policies. Marcus ran his hand along the sleek contour of the car. I appreciate your taking immediate action, Ms. Richards. Unfortunately, experiences like the one I had today aren't uncommon, even for people in my position. William nodded grimly. Terrell and I have had similar experiences, even when shopping together. Some people see color before they see anything else. The irony, Terrell added, is that I was coming here today partly on Marcus's recommendation. We've never met in person, but we've spoken several times about his software. Small world. Vanessa looked startled. You knew each other already? Not exactly, Marcus explained. Terrell reached out to my company about implementing our platform in his real estate business. We've had several video conferences, but never met face-to-face until now. When William mentioned he was bringing me to look at the Vantage, I immediately thought of recommending Richard, Terrell continued. Marcus had mentioned him as an honest salesperson in a previous conversation. William chuckled. The automotive world is surprisingly small. And Richard has helped several of my friends find the right vehicle over the years. As if on cue, the showroom doors opened, and Richard Hartman hurried in, looking flustered. In his mid-40s with kind eyes and a genuine smile, he immediately spotted the group gathered around the Aston Martin. Mr. Thompson. I'm so sorry I'm late. I had a family emergency this morning and just got your messages. Richard approached, shaking Marcus's hand firmly. I see you've met Ms. Richards. Richard, Vanessa greeted him. I understand you've been working with Mr. Thompson on the Vantage purchase. Richard nodded. Yes, for about 2 weeks now. We had everything arranged for today. He looked confused. Was there a problem? Before anyone could respond, Gerald emerged from his office, his expression a mixture of contrition and calculation. He approached the group cautiously. Mr. Thompson, I owe you a sincere apology, he began, his voice carefully modulated to convey remorse. There was clearly a misunderstanding about your appointment and the availability of the vehicle. Marcus studied him for a moment before responding. Was it a misunderstanding, Mr. Whitmore? Or was it an assumption based on what you saw when I walked through that door? The showroom fell silent again. Sales associates and other customers pretended not to listen while straining to hear every word. Gerald swallowed hard. I made an error in judgment. The first step toward change is acknowledging the problem, William Davidson said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. The second is doing something about it. Vanessa turned to Gerald. We'll discuss this further in private. For now, I'd like you to ensure that Richard can complete Mr. Thompson's purchase without any further issues. Her tone made it clear this was not a request but a command. Gerald nodded stiffly. Of course. As Gerald retreated, Terrell turned to Marcus. So, are you still planning to buy the Vantage? Marcus smiled, running his hand along the car's roof. I've dreamed of this car since I was a kid fixing engines with my dad. No one's taking that away from me. Richard beamed. I knew it was the perfect match the moment you test drove it last week. The way your eyes lit up, that's why I love this job. Within the next hour, paperwork was processed, hands were shaken, and photographs were taken. Marcus stood proudly beside his new Aston Martin, Richard and Vanessa flanking him while William and Terrell looked on approvingly. As Richard handed over the keys, he leaned in and whispered, "For what it's worth, Gerald's been a problem for a long time. Many of us are grateful you stood your ground today." Marcus nodded, accepting the keys. Sometimes it takes an incident to spark necessary change. After the purchase was finalized, Vanessa invited everyone to her office for champagne, a tradition for special clients. As they walked through the showroom, she spoke quietly to Marcus. "I'd like to discuss something with you, if you have a moment. We've been looking to redesign our customer experience across all our dealerships. After today, I think you and your company might be exactly what we need to help us improve." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a business opportunity, Ms. Richards?" "I'm offering you a chance to help prevent what happened today from happening to someone else," she replied. "And yes, it would be a significant contract for your company." Later, as they all raised their glasses in Vanessa's elegant office overlooking the city, William offered a toast. "To new beginnings, new partnerships, and lessons learned," he said, his eyes twinkling. "And to always looking beyond the surface to see the person beneath." Terrell added, "And to the beautiful irony of how Gerald's mistake brought all of us together today." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, Marcus found himself reflecting on the day's events. What had begun as an experience of discrimination had transformed into something unexpected: new connections, potential business partnerships, and perhaps most importantly, the opportunity to create meaningful change. Outside, his new Aston Martin gleamed in a parking space reserved for him, not just a dream fulfilled but now a symbol of something more. Perseverance, dignity, and the sweet satisfaction of proving assumptions wrong. 3 months later, the renovated showroom of Prestige Motors sparkled under the evening lights, transformed for the special event. Where once there had been only luxury cars on display, now there were also photographs, powerful images showing people of all backgrounds with their dream vehicles, their stories highlighted in elegant text beneath each portrait. It was the grand opening of the dealership's new, Beyond the Surface, initiative, a program designed to transform the luxury car buying experience for everyone. The brainchild of a unique partnership between Thompson Tech Solutions, Davidson Development, and the Richards Automotive Group, the program had already been implemented at 3 locations, with plans to expand nationally. Marcus Thompson stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. He had become the face of the initiative, his own story serving as its foundation. Beside him, a tablet displayed the new customer experience software his company had developed specifically for the program, technology designed to eliminate bias from the sales process while enhancing personalization. "Quite a turnout," Terrell observed, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Marcus. "William just arrived with the mayor." Marcus nodded, accepting the glass. "I still can't believe how much has happened in 3 months." "I can," Terrell replied with a grin. "You underestimate how terrified corporate America is of a PR nightmare involving discrimination." Vanessa saw an opportunity to do the right thing and get ahead of a potential problem. Cynical, but not wrong, Marcus laughed. Across the room, Richard Hartman, now the general manager of Prestige Motors, was showing Vanessa Richards the latest sales figures on his tablet. After Gerald's departure, Richard had been the obvious choice to lead the dealership's transformation. "Sales up 22% since implementation," Vanessa announced, joining Marcus and Terrell. "And customer satisfaction scores have never been higher. Turns out treating people with respect is good for business," Marcus observed wryly. "Who knew?" The 3 of them shared a laugh as William Davidson approached, accompanied by a distinguished-looking woman in judicial robes. "Marcus, Terrell, Vanessa, I'd like you to meet Judge Elaine Harper," William said. "She's been instrumental in helping establish the scholarship program associated with our initiative." The scholarship, designed to help underprivileged youth gain access to automotive technology training, had been Terrell's idea, but everyone had embraced it enthusiastically. "It's a pleasure to meet you all," Judge Harper said. "William has told me about how this all started." "Quite the story." Marcus shrugged modestly. "Sometimes the worst experiences lead to the best outcomes." "Speaking of which," Vanessa interjected, "have you heard anything from Gerald?" "Last I heard, he was working at his brother-in-law's dealership in the suburbs," Richard replied, joining the conversation. "Apparently, he's had some perspective-altering experiences there." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself standing before the gathered crowd, microphone in hand, sharing the story that had sparked the initiative. He spoke candidly about his experience that day at Prestige Motors, about the anger and humiliation he'd felt, but also about the unexpected opportunities that had emerged from that moment of discrimination. "What happened to me happens to people every day," he said, his voice strong and clear. "The difference is that I was in a position to do something about it. Many aren't so fortunate." He gestured to the photographs lining the walls. "Each of these individuals has a story. Each one has faced assumptions and obstacles based on how they look, how they speak, or where they come from. But each one also persevered and achieved their dream. That's what, beyond the surface, is really about, seeing people for who they truly are, not who we assume them to be." After his speech, as guests mingled and explored the exhibits, Marcus stepped outside for a moment of quiet. His Aston Martin was parked prominently near the entrance, still gleaming as beautifully as the day he'd driven it home. Leaning against the car, he pulled out his phone and opened a message from his father. "Proud of you, son. Mom would be too." Marcus smiled, thinking of how far he'd come from those childhood days spent in his father's repair shop, dreaming of cars like the one he now owned. The journey hadn't been easy, and days like the one that had sparked all this were painful reminders of how much work remained to be done. But standing there, looking back at the transformed showroom filled with people committed to making a difference, he felt something powerful: hope that lasting change was possible, one interaction at a time. As he prepared to return to the event, a young black man approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Thompson. I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you. I'm starting as a sales associate here next week, and your story is the reason I applied. I never thought a place like this would hire someone like me." Marcus extended his hand. "What's your name?" "Darius Johnson, sir." "Well, Darius Johnson, remember this: you belong in every room you enter. Never let anyone make you feel otherwise." The young man nodded, his eyes bright. "Yes, sir. Thank you." As Darius walked away, Marcus took one last look at his car before rejoining the event. What had once been simply a dream purchase had become something more: a symbol of resilience, a catalyst for change, and a reminder that sometimes, the most powerful response to discrimination isn't just perseverance, but transformation. Inside, the celebration continued, not just of luxury automobiles, but of human dignity and the simple yet profound idea that everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, beyond the surface.